Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jeffrey Moss, the founder and CEO of Parker Dewey. I'm really excited about this quarter's state of campus recruiting and being joined by Jackson Canfield from HCA today with all of the discussions around how do you engage college students as campus recruiters are digesting what's gone on over this year's campus recruiting season, trying to wrap things up, planning for next year, thinking about building employer brand and introducing students to new industries and everything else. Just getting to know Jackson over the past year or so, he has just some incredible insights that I think are certainly relevant to the healthcare space, but they're also highly relevant more broadly. So Jackson, really excited to chat with you today. Why don't you just give a quick sort of introduction of who you are for the audience?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Hey, everybody, Jackson Canfield here. I am the AVP of Academic Partnerships for HCA Healthcare's North Florida division. So if any of you have heard of HCA, we have about 180 hospitals separated across, I believe, 21 states in the country, really predominantly that lower southern half of the country. And so again, I'm in the North Florida division where I oversee 15 facilities from Pensacola to South Orlando, and really the roles and responsibilities that I oversee are really being a liaison between the facilities, those 15 facilities, and their academic partners, which really started out in nursing, and we're seeing that grow and stretch of for anyone out there in the healthcare industry into the ancillary spaces, et cetera. So it's great because, it gives me, work for the future, but also shows where we're headed from a healthcare standpoint. So again, appreciate, Jeff, the invitation and really looking forward to the conversation.
No, it's my pleasure. And you said something in the introduction I want to hit on. You talked about the breadth of roles. So when you're doing this early career recruiting, can you talk about that mix between more of what folks would consider healthcare roles versus some of the others, and how your roles and objectives and goals tie to sort of the more medical roles versus, again, the support, and I don't mean support in a negative way, but
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really a full scale spectrum of roles. And so again, I think a lot of companies, and especially HCA, where we can get so focused on the demand that came from COVID, those essential workers, the nurses, et cetera, which again was really my reason for being created from a department standpoint within HCA around academics. But we quickly saw, when we look at academic partners, when we create those relationships and we create those strong relationships, the opportunities are endless and the returns are endless across the board, from again, those higher graduate level degrees all the way down to when you're looking at technical schools and community colleges for those ancillary roles and et cetera. So it really has shown a lot of value right away for HCA as a whole. My role, which I have 15 counterparts in our 15 divisions, and then we also now have a corporate setup structure. So we're expanding resources into the space because the return has been really evident.
And I love that you use the term partnerships with the schools. Can you elaborate more on, again, just dig a little bit more into why the role was created, and what you mean when you say partnerships with the schools?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when I think of partnerships, and disclaimer, I come from a background of business development and sales. So this is really my first step into a,
Oh, wow.
executive healthcare position, which I think is taking me some time to learn the acronyms and terminology of healthcare, but the tactics of business development and sales have really applied well. Because when you have these words like partnership, et cetera, you have partnership as people define as initiatives. You're partnering on this specific venture, but then you really have partnership from a true relationship equity development standpoint. And I think for the most part, they were seeing a gap across healthcare around the relational equity aspect of partnerships. There's a lot of ways that, the state and the federal government could partner in terms of grant money, et cetera. And you could do a lot of things, as you know, at Parker Dewey. But when it came to trust and relationship building, especially when you have an entity the size of HCA, there was a lot of gaps that appeared. And so, again, my role particularly really starts with either myself directly creating the relationships with those schools that we really have aligned with, and then also how am I helping our facility leaders, our hospital leaders, the CNOs, the CEOs develop those relationships as well, and how am I streamlining communication so that, on their own through that relationship, they can come up with their own partnership initiatives to come from, that personal relationship to begin with.
So it's not partnership, meaning that we have the HCA name on a career center, on a building, or sponsor events. Again, that may all be part of it. But when you talk about partnership, it sounds like you're talking about that bi-directional give and take with the schools and with the hiring managers, where you're able to share insights with the schools and get feedback from the schools. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, though.
No, that's exactly it. And I think, as we continue in the conversation, we'll obviously have questions of people around like AI and technology and what's going on here. How are we advancing? We're going to see also the value that's created, even though we're advancing technology, the value of those personalized community-based relationships. And we're actually going to probably see greater benefits from those, while complementing the technology that's advancing us. So, because again, you can have AI do write up an email for you, but, to establish trust and rapport with, a dean of a college or a president of a college and the CEO of a facility to, spend X amount of dollars, that takes time, effort, and a lot of trust. So that those will never be able to take place, even as far as technology advances. So.
Yeah, and by the way, again, we hear similar things from the schools, that recruiters who have never been onto campus before think they can just show up and automatically build that relationship, not just with the school itself, but with the students, and how it needs to be ongoing and authentic and real. And we are definitely going to dig more into AI. We have a bunch of questions that people submitted beforehand. I know AI was in there. Again, I neglected to say that at the beginning, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A. We're definitely going to leave time for questions, and we'll try to weave some of these into the conversation. You brought up something, how you started your career in business development. I mean, I'd just be interested, like when you were in college, did you ever think that you would be in an HR role or working for a healthcare company? And how did you wind up there?
Yeah, great question. I'm not going to bore everyone with my life story, but long story short, started out in college as a biology major. A huge influence from my grandfather, who was a radiologist, and thought that was my path, and realized I was too people oriented for that point in time of radiology. So that and organic chemistry were my calling cards to maybe switch up my career. But then actually I took a path to kinesiology, exercise science. I thought I was going to be a PT if I wasn't going to be a radiologist. And, got to that point in time, cat out of the bag. I realized that I wasn't probably as smart as I needed to be. And therefore it was like, okay, what do I have that's else out there? I love sports. I had the opportunity to play 2 sports in college and had a lot of fun with that for a smaller school. And so, started getting thrown out. Hey, have you thought of medical sales? Device, you're a personable person. People like you. Can you, get into sales? And so I'm trying to find this way that I can encompass all of them, and happen to fall upon a company called Smith and Nephew Orthopedics, similar to Stryker Orthopedics, a huge, large orthopedic organization out of Britain, but huge influence obviously in the U.S. And so took a role in their trauma department and was a trauma rep for almost 4 years. And then that really spearheaded my confidence into sales. And, there's nothing more humbling than being a 22, 23-year-old, being in the OR, having that opportunity, that privilege to work with a traumatologist that's working on a, adolescent patient with a hip fracture. And then you need to implement that adolescent nail at the right trajectory, to not, interfere with growth plates and things like that. We were working with circular X frames, X fixes, and just again, opportunity to experience those individuals at such a high level. You realize that the problems that you face are not always the problems right in front of you. They're always the secondary ones that you don't put so much attention to. So when we look at, even again, bringing it back to campus recruiting, it's as I was looking at these questions too, it's not so much the events that we're trying to do, it's the little things that take discipline to follow up with, the gathering of information, basic information. Do we have a plan in place to one, gather that information, and what's our plan to actually use it? Are we, emailing? Are we text messaging if we provide that? So all in all, career-wise, it just really, I could see how it's all built upon each other to be in this role today.
No, I forgot you worked at Smith Nephew. I mean, we've talked about them quite a bit. They've been great partners of ours. And then again, have talked about the fact that so many college students don't realize there's roles in business development. They're like you studying biology or studying something in the health sciences, realize that medical school is just not what they want to do. Um, here are other opportunities, and how do you introduce that?
Mhm.
Um, when you're running the recruiting efforts for your team, we talked about the breadth of roles that you're recruiting from, the more medical ones versus the more support, again, the strategy, the HR, the accounting, et cetera. Um, are you focusing right now on specific pools of students, whether it's majors or schools or sort of first and second year students versus closer to graduation, or are your efforts more broad? I don't know. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. So obviously you have to really slow down and go 30,000 feet whenever you're facing a um, dimensional issue like staffing of nurses or just academic partnerships in general, just staffing our hospitals. So it really you have to really separate from acute issues versus long-term plays, strategic plays. So just speaking on our current situation, again, this is healthcare wide, but again, I mentioned those ancillary roles. So those ancillary roles, the radiology techs, CT techs, et cetera, that's an acute issue that we're going to be facing, similar to how we faced the nursing crisis for COVID. So we're doing, acute solutions that really tactical, really, heavy presence in those spheres, whether again through social media or events, physical events, those initiative-based partnerships with community colleges, et cetera, working with I cover Orlando, so we're working with workforce development companies in Orlando, bringing healthcare partners together. And so, you obviously need to address those acute issues. But then if you're not also planning those long-term strategic plays, it's going to burn you on the back end. So what we're looking at is, okay, who are our academic partners that, have high pass rates, have the quality of students that we're looking for to become HCA nurses, and how are we investing our time strategically? What do we have that is different than other healthcare partners that we can provide to create a win-win for them? Approach that I have is never it's always creating win-win situations, even when you have multiple competitors in the ball game, because long term it's always going to help you. So we have differentiators within HCA that can complement that institution, but also doesn't, negate them from being in relationship with other partners. There's not a world out there that you're going to be able to monopolize everything. So why would that be your focus? So it's how do you stand out? How do you provide value? How do you have that institution know that they want to be in partner with you, different than others? So.
No, and it's a really insightful point, because it's got to be authentic, and it's not a zero sum game. It's all about helping the prospective candidates, the students, understand the breadth of opportunities and figure out which one is the right fit. Because if a student goes to the wrong place, it's not a good outcome for anyone. So I love that point. You brought up something. I'm going to take us off on a little bit of a tangent. You talked about the community colleges, and earlier you were mentioning the work you were doing with hiring managers. How open are you finding hiring managers to looking beyond the traditional feeder schools or academic pedigrees? And in particular, I'm thinking less about more of the medical or allied health roles, and thinking more about some of where, again, a certification or credentials required. And I'm thinking about more of those other roles, again, whether it's in CRM management, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in HR. Are you seeing more openness by those hiring managers to look beyond academic pedigree?
Yeah, no, great question. I think this is a great plug to shout out Parker Dewey, just because they're always open to it. But a lot of times, as everyone out there and understands, You can have a great idea, but the implementation of that great idea, when you compare it to acute problems, can oftentimes be pushed aside, and it can delay, and so we know that there's opportunity to partner with those academic institutions outside of, just nursing, ancillary, et cetera, but it's hard to reach those students. They're not as the luxury of nursing and ancillaries, you get to experience those students in a clinical rotation space. It's such a great advantage. You have to take it into consideration of meeting those students, the experience that they're having. It's a job interview for us while they're going into school. So when you don't have that luxury, trying to be creative about how to expend your resources in a way that's going to help identify that individual, help identify the roles that you actually need, et cetera, can be a little bit more difficult. So unintentionally, I think that's why Parker Dewey has a role and a fit in the marketplace, is because we have needs, we have opportunities for partnership on a smaller scale, and if we can plug in individuals from community colleges, really expand our reach to institutions that we haven't had an opportunity to tap into, it really does provide the institution themselves to prove themselves to us and us to them. So
I hadn't thought about that until you just said it. I mean, even though we did the prep call and you and I have spoken for a year, like I didn't put the connection together that this is the way you're recruiting for the medical roles. By seeing them in action, by building those real experiences, all you're doing now, again, whether it's Parker Dewey or in general, is creating ways to sort of replicate that in the non-medical roles. And
exactly.
it's really, really cool. Sorry, were you about to say something?
No, just I guess I would just say, yeah, it's again, when you're focusing on demand and resource allocation, you're probably not going to get the dollars that you would, again, from an HCA perspective, that you're going to get towards nursing to those other roles that are still vital. So how do you attract them? How do you even connect with them? How do you even understand what's out there? And so I know that we're excited to continue to utilize Parker Dewey as one of our avenues to do that.
Thank you. And again, just for folks who are here for the first time, the State of Campus Recruiting, not intended to be a Parker Dewey advertisement. I certainly appreciate the kind words, but really, again, I've always just been thrilled with your insights in the space. I want to talk more about the challenges you're seeing with the traditional recruiting model, because we've talked a lot about, again, the career fairs and the info sessions. And maybe we can start with just what you're seeing right now as an employer, but then maybe dig in more about your own experience as a college student. Because again, as you said, you were a two-letter college athlete, or student athlete when you were in school. So if you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing with sort of the traditional model now, and then we can dig in more about your own personal experience.
Yeah. So first part of your question about events and what we're seeing that works, et cetera. My experience being that in Florida, we're having the luxury right now that our experienced nurses are growing. A lot of people are moving to Florida. So it's causing us to have to look differently from a workforce standpoint of how to engage our institutions in a way that might not have to address the drastic demand that we were having, but also still, creates that steady pipeline. And so, again, I know I mentioned it before, but really, the models that we have in place are not ineffective. The on-campus, the on-site, et cetera. What we're really seeing is that the students themselves and individuals ourselves, we are in a society that's growing so rapidly with technology and opportunities to capitalize on time and efficiency that we're missing the mark on basic skills like just comprehension of messaging, et cetera. So, what used to take 2 to 3 messages to have a student respond with, applying out a form or filling out a survey, now might take 4, 5, 6. Well, if we're in that position where we're going to need to compensate in that way, our processes have to shift with, the type of student, the type of person, the type of individual that we all are having to become due to the advances in technology. So I really think it's the core models work. It's what's your follow-up processes and are they clean?
I 100% agree. Again, I think the concept of even back to your title, academic partnerships, continuing to have those deep relationships with the schools, continuing to be on campus, continuing to participate in those events in an authentic way is key. But to your point, it's not just the volume of follow-ups. I mean, there's research out there talking about, again, pick a percent, 50%, 70%, whatever, students are actually blocking recruiting emails now
Yep.
because they're getting inundated. So how do you effectively get through that noise? It's also, I think, to your point, I mean, you said you focus on Florida, you're visiting those Florida schools, building the relationships. Are you doing certain things to try to engage the students who are from Florida but attend school in California or Colorado or New Jersey and want to come home? Do you worry that some of those traditional models may not be as effective because you can't be on campus?
Yeah, that's a great question. I did see, I saw Lindsay put in the chat too around the what I define as models of academic partnership. So really just thinking, career fairs, our recruitment team actual visits, if we have a partner that's really impactful for us, we may host a larger event on campus to expand multiple departments of that school. So when I talk about models, that's pretty your general recruitment approaches to academic institutions. And so what you were asking, Jeff, around, students outside of Florida, we've tried that, and particularly in the Southeast, we got Alabama, Georgia, et cetera. It makes sense. I don't think in this point in time, we have enough supply in Florida across the whole state, where, absolutely we have the blessing of having hospitals in California. So whenever we have a student here that is from California, is planning on going back to California, we have a process in place that connects them with that recruiter out there and makes that transition seamless for them. But what we're seeing, again, I oversee the North Florida division. We're seeing opportunities where we can grow in our strategic handoffs of students that are from the Miami area but are going to school in Orlando at UCF, for example. And so how we strategically identify those individuals, give them that great experience on their way back, if that's where they want to go, is a place that we have the cognitive awareness of, and we can do it manually, but we have opportunity to refine that from an experience standpoint, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And again, you're blessed that you have, again, HCA's massive organization with a, again, not massive campus recruiting, but a number of people covering different regions. So you're able to do those handoffs. It's just something we've heard a lot from organizations where they don't necessarily have that broader campus recruiting geographic footprint. I want to double click on something because you talked about, again, the career fairs, the info sessions, the on-campus events, which I think you and I are in complete agreement. They're wonderful and huge opportunities. Thinking back to when you were a student athlete, how did those fit within your schedule?
Yeah, great point.
Well, it's not a point. It's again, not bad, good. I think a
Yeah,
lot of
no,
organizations aren't necessarily thinking about that.
totally. It can't be your only touch point, if that makes sense. You're gonna have to spend extra time to really listen to the institution themselves. I think that's an opportunity that gets missed so often is, we obviously come into the conversation assuming that, they're just gonna give us everything that we need in that first discovery call of how this is gonna go. But I'm finding even for myself that I really have to ask clarifying questions of, hey, if we structure this event on this day at this time, is that the most are the students most likely going to be on campus at that time, et cetera? And so when you think about all of us being in a world where we're having to juggle now more and more demand, et cetera, we have to slow down and clarify even basic logistical criterias in order to get the biggest return. Because yeah, as a student athlete, and putting myself in a student's perspective, I'm not thinking about what the institution or the company is trying to share with me. once I receive that message and understand that message and that message benefits me, absolutely, I want to engage and participate, but it's not my fault that I don't know what I don't know. And so therefore, it really is on the institution first to do their due diligence to understand all the different dynamics of the event. Quality over quantity, it really comes down to, and even a basic on-campus event, take the extra 10 minutes, take the extra 15 minutes, ask those questions, really then show the institution that you care enough to make it a great event for them as well as
Yeah.
the students.
Well, then again, one of the comments that came in from the chat, and I think we've talked about, is as a student athlete, were you as able to participate in some of those events given, again, the athletic schedule and practices, and the fact that you're essentially working a full-time job as a student athlete, in addition to having a full course load and wanting to do well? Do you worry that sometimes the events being hosted for career exploration aren't necessarily as accessible? Not yours, but in general. Again, I'm trying to think back to when you were a student.
Yeah, no, I do. It really was, a job, for the entire year. Again, if you're not actually in the season, your workouts and everything along those lines for whatever division that you play for, it encompasses your time just like a season would. So, again, it's really on like whose responsibility is it to adapt to the student? It's the institute, it's the company and the institution. So again, maybe it's you work with the head of athletics for the institution. Maybe there's an um, activity or initiative that can be created through the athletic departments, and you're going to give back in certain ways. So there's so much opportunity. There's never a no. There's always a, hey, what else could this look like? To your point, because I think oftentimes we blame the student or we blame technology or we blame social media for them not engaging with our content. But as soon as or our message, as soon as we take that approach, we've already lost because it's really not their responsibility.
Well, and that's again an important point. As you know, we do this annual student sentiment survey every year. I think we're wrapping up this year's, where we ask thousands of college students, again, ranging from first year to graduate student, how they want to be recruited, what events they're participating in. One of the things that shocked me from last year is 50% of college students said they're not attending career fairs. 70% said they're not attending info sessions. And one of the comments was, yeah, I go, but I'm only engaging with those companies I know I already want to work with, which again, kind of counterintuitive. Fortunately, and again, for the colleges and universities on the call, I think fortunately we're seeing a lot of schools spending more effort and focus on those student athletes and sort of that pathway to professional roles, especially recognizing that over 98% of the student athletes aren't going to play pro sports when they graduate. And I think that's just football and basketball. You add in other sports like field hockey or lacrosse or swimming, and it's an even greater percentage. On the student athletes, again, we've talked about this. It's kind of interesting that more companies aren't doing, again, that deeper dive on the student athletes, given they have those core skills. And again, we're not talking about knowing how to code in Python or do data analytics, which they have, but also things like grit and teamwork. And one that comes up all the time, coachability.
Hmm.
Do you feel like your time as a student athlete better prepared you for those things?
Oh my goodness,
I mean, it's a
absolutely.
leading question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, if we want to go, hopefully my wife and I have kids in our future, just the value alone of being able to understand team dynamics, understand, like you said, coachability, perseverance. I felt very prepared to be in a team setting professionally due to those experiences I had as an athlete. And so, yeah, when you're a company looking at who do we want to hire and who do we want to seek out for hiring roles. I mean, I will always have an interview with someone who, was on a team, an active participant in a team, because they're going to understand things that maybe a normal or a student just having the college experience might not have. That's not saying that they wouldn't understand it as well, and maybe, you know, in other settings have developed those skills even above and beyond an athlete. But there's definitely a direct correlation there as well.
Yeah, and again, that's some of the irony is sometimes again they're comparing the student athletes to the non-athletes, and when you have companies that are using GPA thresholds, they're not taking into account some of those things. Again, fortunately, we're seeing a larger percentage of companies not have those thresholds, but it's that recognition. Um,
Jeff, I'll say this too, you know, just in addition to that, when I think about in real time, the community engagement aspect that I was able to receive as being a student athlete, you know, you're participating in your community as part of your team and part of your university. We would work with, you know, foster care systems and boys and girls clubs and things like that. And so getting that experience, just that whole roundedness of what's important, again, might not have been something I would have participated in as a regular student. So I think there's value there as well.
100% agree. I mean, my daughter's a student athlete in high school, and it's the same thing beyond the athletics, the community activities that become core to it, both from a teamwork and leadership, but back to that point of coachability. I mean, I think about all of the recent college grads that get hired that feel like they need perfection from day one. And they're not, and they get defensive. And how do you find someone that's coachable? Because you and I and everyone else who've been in the workforce, we know you don't know everything day one. We're expecting you to have questions. We're expecting you to learn. And that coachability is just so vital. And having that comfort that you're not going to be perfect again day one. We got a question again beforehand from many folks where they were asking about how can you reach some of the potential applicants given the above beyond sort of the tried and true career fair and info session. Again, not that anyone's going to stop that, but in addition.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we're in still the discovery phase of what that looks like and what's actually effective. Because there's obviously a lot of opportunities with technology, AI, you know, automated texting systems, automated emailing systems, automated this, automated that, which is great. It makes the efficiency so much better, but also then you're feeling like you're understanding that if the message is not crafted correctly, huge high rate of, you know, dropouts or people you know, canceling your automated texting threads, etc. So I think we are in real time in the dynamic of what that actually looks like. We've got those models that are consistent. And you know, if there is a proven track record with an automated, you know, messaging system, marketing system, etc., have we really discovered the specific marketing message per the audience you're trying to speak to? Because again, you know, you look at the institution dynamics, you know, your state schools are going to require a different message than your community colleges and technical schools. That's just, you know, based on, you know, demographics, et cetera. So are you bringing that into the equation? Are you helping to, you know, help those individuals feel heard where they're at and the situations that they're in? You know, we've recently acquired Galen College of Nursing, which has been an excellent partnership. And one of the opportunities that we have with that student population is how do we assist their needs where they're at? Oftentimes the statistics have shown those students have dependents. Are we meeting their tangible needs, you know, from a childcare standpoint while they're in nursing school? And does our approach to trying to connect with them complement their at-home state, or does it create more of a burden? Are we trying to put expectations on them when we really could be assisting them? So again, it's really slowing down to understand those dynamics. And then I think that, you know, in the next 2 to 3 years, 5 years, maybe we'll really probably see those new models come out and show themselves as technology continues to advance. I mean, you got Gemini coming out after ChatGPT. Who knows what'll come next? So.
Well, and one of the things again that you're bringing up, and I think we heard this during COVID, was you can't take the traditional models and just replicate them with technology and expect them to perform better. Again, blasting emails to students if it's not working, using AI to blast emails to students, guess what? It's still not going to work. If career fairs are having certain challenges, again, as wonderful as they are, taking them virtual isn't going to immediately solve all of those challenges. It'll solve some, but
Mhm.
not all. And I love the point about the new models. We also, I mean, to your point about it being a two-way street, I know from the work that you're doing and what we're hearing from our friends at Florida A&M, the students have loved engaging with you and HCA, and it feels like that two-way street
Mhm.
where Florida A&M has been able to get insights and is using those insights, not forcing them into the classroom to take away academic freedom, but to better coach and mentor the students and ensure they're, again, and also actually communicate to the employers how prepared and amazing their students are. Shout out to FAMU, by the way, if there's anyone on the call from here.
Yeah, I think the one of the top takeaways I would share from this conversation would be as much as yes, you have your scheduled events, we have our models, we have everything in place. If we aren't dedicating time and effort to cultivating the relationships with the top stakeholders and whoever that might be, institution, company, etc., you won't get to that tangible event with any true quality with it because we don't understand the dynamics of that stakeholder from the institution has on the way that they're communicating about the event to the student body, etc. The either enthusiasm that they have because they love working with you or the monotoned come if you want because they put up with you. And if that relationship at the top is not sincere, genuine, full of trust, full of transparency, full of true win-wins, yeah, you're probably going to feel that on the back end with those events. So that's one thing that we try to keep top of mind. And if that top tier relationship needs to be deposited with trust, then we need to go and deposit it with trust. And what that looks like varies obviously.
So we did get some questions in the chat. I'm sorry, beforehand, and I want to ask you. And again, this is going to have a little bit of a Parker Dewey tinge, but it's meant to be about micro internships overall. One of the reasons I think a lot of folks were excited is they're trying to figure out if they can use these micro internships, this experiential recruiting concept within their organizations. And there were a lot of questions about, again, background checks and legal compliance, et cetera. And while we've talked about it a lot, I think given your work in a highly regulated healthcare setting, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you were able to make that work at HCA and if there were issues.
Yeah, good question. So obviously when you're dealing with the healthcare industry, you're possibly having to address any patient information, HIPAA, et cetera. And so the way that we were able to address this is obviously just not including anything that would remotely be involving patient information, which is so many opportunities for us. And so the most recent micro internship we were able to conduct with Parker Dewey involved our usage of Power BI and our reporting system for our student rotations. And just from a calendar perspective, so our facilities knew, hey, these are the students that you have in your facility, not from an individual student standpoint, but just XYZ school, XYZ time, date, etc. in a dashboard setting. At that point in time, it was completely manual on an Excel spreadsheet. And so again, I'm in this role, but I don't know how to operate Power BI. I know there's people out there that do better than me. So, we have an acute issue that could meet an immediate need. And so to be able to have that opportunity to, again, as we're running around with our head cut off, trying to get things done, can we have somebody dedicated who can focus, 20 some hours on that? And, with the hope that it turns into something more, but also the flexibility that if it doesn't, we haven't ruined anything. There's still a win-win. There's still value being given to that student. And so for us, we were able to take a recent UCF grad, business analyst, computer programming individual, help us with our Power BI project. She was a great individual, really kind person. And at the end of it, it was basically, hey, how can we help you? she said, I would love to look in some possibilities of roles within HCA, and we were able to plug her in, given those high level relationships within a matter of a couple weeks, transparently. So again, it's yeah, trying to find what's the pathway of least resistance and creates the best, most genuine win-win.
No, and I love that. And that comes to a question that was in the chat about what challenges did y'all face? I love the y'all face with creating campus recruiting channels, with workforce development programs, both internally and with stakeholder buy-in, and with basic HR qualifications. And again, I think the example you gave is a great one, because was it something like when you were having students do this project, was it difficult to get hiring manager buy-in? I mean, to your point that everyone's running around like the chicken with the head cut off.
Are you meaning after they completed the micro internship and they're
I
looking
would
for
say
hiring?
both to offer both for them to provide the project opportunity and be open to working with the student, and then did it change the perspective of hiring managers to create more openness to candidates beyond the traditional feeders? Does that make sense?
It
It's something
does.
might be early.
It wasn't a direct hire to the person involved in the project. So I don't know if I can answer that
Okay.
authentically of a changed mindset, but what happened was, we were satisfied with the project, absolutely wanting to help this individual. And then when she said, hey, I basically said, hey, take a look at what's out there from a role standpoint. We've got great resources with that. I'm sure everyone else there does. So if you find a role that you're interested in, I will speak on behalf of the performance that you provided. So that right there, I mean, just from an efficiency standpoint, from any people overseeing institutions out there for their students, if you can have the employer speak to, a colleague on behalf of your student, that they were, great in this 20-hour period. I mean, gosh, talk about a resume builder. It was instantly the colleague of mine responded, that's amazing feedback, and she was hired a week later. So, talk about again, path of least resistance.
I want to hit a question that was in the chat, and it ties to one that came through from the pre-questions from the audience beforehand. The question in the chat, in your opinion, who do you think students are listening to when considering employment opportunities? Faculty, recruiters, fellow students, alumni, hiring leaders, etc.
Great question. Again, I can only speak from the healthcare perspective. I would say for a nurse, more often than not, it's their faculty members and their colleagues, or excuse me, their fellow students, colleagues. And that's why for us, we need to have insights and around the adjunct faculty that we have, or that the institutions have, taking those students and participating in our clinical rotations in our facilities. So again, healthcare individuals out there, if not, the institutions will hire adjunct faculty to conduct the clinical rotations, and those can be hired on by anyone. And so understanding that those students are more often than not listening to those adjunct faculty members or just faculty members in general, because they build trust with them. I mean, I want to hear from the person that has invested in me and cares about me, etc. And so, if you've got an individual that, may have had a bad experience at a certain healthcare partner and, doesn't think it's a great fit for the student, that's going to reflect, even if it's true or even if it's not true. So the more we can do to really show our workforce that this is a great opportunity to connect with our students, as well as benefit the facility as a whole from a recruitment standpoint. To answer their question directly, I would say absolutely any faculty members or students as well, even over recruiters. You're going to have a small bit that, just know the business, know what they want, going to trust a recruiter. But I think if you got a student on the fence, which is probably the majority, it's going to be probably faculty.
Yeah, I think, again, this goes back to the point about colleges are sharing with us, and even some recruiters, like, we're trying to do more with XYZ college, but we're having trouble building that relationship. Or if we have, like, they can't expect that it's going to happen overnight. They need to build up those advocates, those authentic advocates internally, both the faculty members, but also current students, former students who are there, because students, again, they see through, they're cynical. They
Yeah,
see
and
through the
it's really listening to the institution to realize why there aren't, those advocates, or why they are feeling those pain points, because it makes no sense for a healthcare, or a company to try to push advocates into a workspace when there's clear pain points and opportunities being felt. Before you try to get anyone to, go and speak, your name from the mountaintops, go address those pain points, really understand them completely, and then you've almost created that advocate for yourself, to complement the, people that you're trying to build into those advocates, et cetera. So,
Well, and this is a great segue to another question that came in beforehand. I'm interested in the role social media is or is not playing in recruiting with this next generation. I've heard arguments for both sides, but I'm interested in knowing what the research says. I'm not sure. I know I haven't seen the research. We certainly see a lot of efforts to use social media to build that employer brand. So I haven't seen research on effectiveness or not. Jackson, I don't know if you've seen any research, and if not, if you have any anecdotal stories or experiences from HCA.
yeah, no, it is a great question. It's obviously, a hot topic for everyone. Again, I think it really comes down to, have you clearly identified your audience? Because different audiences are going to adapt to different platforms, et cetera. So, in the and it depends on the institution. Again, you've got institutions that their average age graduate is 22, and you've got institutions their average age is 32, and completely, a decade, but two very different individuals of how they interact with social media. So, I'll give you a practical example. In the new hire space or new grad space, I don't see us right now venturing so much more outside of like LinkedIn, Facebook. Um, I don't see us going as heavy into Instagram and TikTok. Again, it depends on the size, depends on your own situation. And it's really kind of, I don't have hard data behind these, decisions, but it's really just been an eye test of engagement. So, that's what I would say from the new grad space, current student space, but even from an employee space. I just had a conversation with one of our facility educators who oversees not only the education for our students in their clinical, but also staff in their continued educational development. And she's like, I think I want to do TikTok. I think I want to do Instagram. But then the last 30 minutes, she's been telling me how the Facebook page has just been blowing up and everyone's talking about it and everyone's engaging in it. I'm like, why would you spend all that extra time over something that might work, but you've already got something clearly working? Just run it, run it till you're not seeing any of that engagement like you are. So, resource allocation is a big component of this. I would rather spend 20 extra or 30 extra minutes of my day with my team, slowly, methodically working through how our processes are performing, versus 30 minutes on TikTok that I really don't know if it's going to return. So,
I
that's
need
how I
to
would
talk to my
do
daughters. I will admit, I don't know how to use TikTok, but I will admit my daughters for about 6 seconds thought I was pretty cool because they saw a Parker Dewey TikTok thing that some student created. So
Yeah, and maybe that's an awesome micro internship for students. Throw it out there. I mean, geez, if you're not an expert in it and you're not willing, and it's not a full-on corporate or whatever leadership initiative, get somebody else to try it out for you and pilot it.
well, it's funny you say that. We had this is going to be a Parker Dewey advertisement. Sorry. We had actually a couple of companies have done this where they had micro interns from different schools create a series of, I think it was TikTok and Instagram posts that they could use to drive engagement. And they didn't give the
Totally.
students access to their TikTok they had the students create it. They still reviewed, and the ones they liked that they thought were on brand, they pushed out there, and they did it as this quick sort of low cost test to figure out, did it work? And by the way, again, you know about this program. There's a program being funded by the Frederick DeLuca Foundation that ends at the end of this month, I believe, where they're actually covering 100% of the cost of the micro internships, for students who go to a selected group of schools, including the HBCUs, HSIs, schools in Florida and Connecticut. And I'll ask my colleague Lindsay to drop a link in the chat. There's a link specifically for those involved in campus recruiting that I think has that social media project I just mentioned. So you can literally click a button, have a college student do the project you just mentioned, no cost to you, and see. Sorry for the advertisement. When you brought that up, I had to.
It's a great play. It really is. Like you said, zero effort, very low cost, and you can always say no.
Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact, and you keep on hitting this, it's got to be authentic, it's got to be real. So even if you're paying a bunch of bots or a bunch of people or a bunch of influencers to try to spread your message, the college kids see through it. They know, as perfect as your website is about company culture, again, as soon as they have that first conversation with a current employee or with a recent grad from their school, they're going to know if it aligns to the truth. So,
And depends on your product or service as well. If you're trying to sell trinkets, yeah, blast away. There's not a lot of intrinsic, like authentic or intentional relational value in that. When you're trying to communicate a career, someone launching into how they're gonna provide for themselves and their family, yeah, you better be a little bit more intentional because the weight of that ask is a lot greater than purchasing a pair of shoes or something like that.
and where things are just so different than, and again, you're younger than me, but like when I was graduating college, there was just such limited information. Again, you could call a couple of alums that may have been in a certain company or industry, but there was no LinkedIn. The internet was in its infancy. Like, you kind of relied on what you heard at the career fair and the info session to get a sense for a company. Now there's so many more ways for students to see through it and to recognize, and no matter what you try to put out there as your employer brand, it's got to be real. So how do you convey it most effectively and authentically?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I know we're going to be wrapping up here in the next couple of minutes. I tried to get to all the questions that came through, but I failed miserably. I know there were a bunch of other questions. We'll try to hit them for folks in the follow-up when we send that around. But if people have questions, either for me or Jackson, if you're open to it, I assume you're okay if people message you on LinkedIn or
Please.
whatnot.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I really appreciate the time. Are there any sort of parting words you want to leave sort of the group with, sort of key takeaways or whatever?
Yeah, no, I just appreciate the time, Jeff. I've really enjoyed the conversation and enjoyed working with you. A quote that comes to mind just for myself that has really guided me, in my young professional career, but I think it's taken me where I'm at today is listen to understand, don't listen to respond. And again, when we're dealing with students or we're dealing with people often that we're trying to get their buy-in, but we don't have the luxury of building a relationship with them. In whatever aspect, whatever format, whatever experience that you have, when you listen to understand versus listen to respond, more often than not, you're going to actually give a quality answer to whatever's being asked of you. So that's what I would say is a departing word of sorts. Um,
I was trying to think of a response as you were talking. No, I'm just no,
yeah.
it's a great point. It's again the importance of that two-way communication, because at the end of the day, again, as I think about applying that to campus recruiting, it's not about can we convince a student to apply? Can we convince a student to take the offer, to convert from an internship to a full-time role? It's about listening to one another and mutually determining if it's the right fit. And
Mhm.
if it's not, that's okay. And it's creating a process to try to tease that out as early and effectively as possible. And I think your message very much, again, rings true.
Well said.
Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. It was great talking with you. Again, I think what you're doing at HCA is just so amazing. It's a great example for other organizations to learn from, both in the healthcare sector and more broadly. And I really value the opportunity to have gotten to know you over the past several years and continue to work with you. And I know, again, we've talked about Florida A&M. I know in Central Florida and FIU, I know they're huge fans of the work that you're doing and the opportunities you're providing to their students and recent grads. So thank you for everything you're doing.
No, absolutely. And again, if anyone has any further questions, and I would love to connect and just continue the conversation. But likewise, appreciate what you're doing, Jeff and Parker Dewey. It's a real value add for our students.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice when there's win-wins for students, for schools, for HR, for hiring managers, and I appreciate it. And for anyone who missed the very beginning of it, Jackson will also be sharing the Lululemon of business attire. If you send him a LinkedIn, I'm sure he'd be happy to share that. With that, this concludes this quarter's State of Campus Recruiting. Thank you so much for joining us and for all the great questions and comments both before and during the session. Jackson, a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time.